So, civilization or chaos, top of page 239. Um, from the point of view of truth and nothing but truth, the universal mind is of importance only so long as our ignorance subsists. It is only from the viewpoint of ignorance that the universal mind is of prime importance. In other words, if man is not completely conscious God, or if God is not completely conscious man, both states are of no use to us in our own self-realization. For ourself, for our own self, the only thing that matters about Christ is his Godhood, whether it is with or without the universal mind. But for those who believe in God through Christ, the only thing that counts is the fact that God has been Christ with the universal mind. If the universal mind is really that, then God as Christ cannot, through the universal mind, respond to anyone at any time or in any way. But if we can believe in God as in I am God, whether as a master of the age or whether as a master of the cycle, he is always there for everyone, no matter how one may believe in him. The question of prime importance is not the type of belief, but the sincerity behind it. This is the same as the Sufi concept of Muhammad as the Hayatun Nabi, or the ever-living prophet of God. The master, such as the Avatar, is the same one eternal Christ, all-time Zoroaster, never-dying Buddha, ever-present Krishna. Prayer or intense desire of a devotee, as well as the grace of God, both jointly or severally can, may, and do bring about divine response, no matter in what particular faith the aspirant may be. In regard to the question of the inability of disembodied masters and other great souls to affect humanity, Hazrat Naqshband made the following apt remarks in a Persian quatrain. How long you'll waste your precious years in pilgrimage to tombs of this and that, against 1,000 lions, dead and gone. More spiritually alive is the adept's cat. It should be understood, however, that the disembodied saints do continue to affect the world by their spiritual radiations of grace, which are all part of the content of the higher spheres. Also, it is well known that people have derived benefit from visiting tombs or making pilgrimages. So great is the spiritual radiance and influence which surrounds the sepulcher of a great saint. But if we think of the benefit derived in this way, what can it be when one is in the presence of or near a living saint? Here we will quote Dr. Munsif on this subject, January 1940, Mayor Public Journal. Quote, treating the subject from the analogy of electricity, the difference in the spiritual potency of buried saints and living saints will be made much clearer. Scientists will tell you that the indirect or alternate current of electricity is much more dangerous than the direct current. The indirect current, when touched, very often kills, which the direct current seldom does. And further, the earthing process, that is the burying of the copper wire in the earth, serves to neutralize the extra load on the current with the magnetism of the earth, thereby making the machinery and the surroundings comparatively immune from damage and harm. Similarly, the spiritual powers of the masters after disembodiment are merged or neutralized with the universal and infinite powers of Almighty God, which sustain unceasingly the process of evolution. But the living masters are the spiritual powerhouses round which the atmospherics, Tajaliyat Shaktis, are much more active and powerful. Spiritual masters are concerned with and emanate both the spiritual currents, Tajaliya Shaktis, direct or indirect. The direct one is their divine aspect of Jamal or Jamal, divine beatitude, which takes cognizance of devotion, bhakti, and love on the part of the seeker and rewards him in proportion to the sincerity and intensity of longing. While the indirect one is the aspect of Jalal, divine glory, which responds quickly and irrevocably to any mischievous act or intention towards them. And the powerhouses, the spiritual masters, though presenting these two aspects in their lives on earth, are yet above and beyond them. It is in this sense, the sons say, that spiritual masters neither bless nor curse anyone. Whatever reactions, good or bad, that people experience when contacting such masters are the result of and due to the response of the numerous powers, Tajaliyat Shaktis, that are alive and active around such personalities. Once, when Mayor Baba was asked what should be the correct and safest attitude of people towards the saints, he recalled the significant words of the Persian poet Hafiz, Ya makun ba pil banan dosti, ya bina kun kana e dar kurda pil, which means either do not form friendship with an elephant driver or be prepared to receive his elephant as well. Mayor, could you unmute and continue?
Yeah, thanks. What is Maya? In brackets, false values. Chapter 2, page 13. Excerpts from the discourses of Meher Baba. Importance of understanding the falsehoods of Maya. Everyone wants to know and to realize the truth. But truth cannot be known and realized as truth unless ignorance is known and realized as ignorance. Hence arises the importance of understanding Maya, or the principle of ignorance. People read and hear so much about Maya, but few understand what it really is. It is not enough to have a superficial understanding of Maya. It is necessary that Maya should be understood in its reality. To understand Maya, or the principle of ignorance, is to know half the truth about the universe. Ignorance in all its forms must disappear if the soul is to be established in the state of self-knowledge. Therefore, it is imperatively necessary for man to know that which is false to know it as being false, and to get rid of the false by knowing it to be false. The essence of a falsehood. What is the essential nature of falsehood? If the true is known as being true, or if the false is known as being false, there is no falsehood, but only a form of knowledge. Falsehood consists in taking the true as being false, or the false as being true. That is, in considering something to be other than what it really is in itself. So, falsehood is an error in judging the nature of things. Two kinds of knowledge. Broadly speaking, there are two kinds of knowledge. One, purely intellectual judgments about the facts of existence, and two, judgments of value, which imply the appreciation of the worth or importance of things. Purely intellectual judgments or beliefs derive their importance from their being related to values in some way. If they are diverse from values, they have very meager importance in themselves. For example, no one takes much interest in counting exactly the number of leaves which exist in a particular tree. Although from the purely theoretical point of view, such information will be a form of knowledge. But such information of or knowledge is treated as unimportant because there is no vitality connected with other values. Intellectual knowledge becomes important when it enables man to realize certain values by giving control over the means to their realization, or when it enters into valuation itself as an important factor, modifying or in some way affecting the accepted values. False values arise due to the influence of subjective wants. Mistakes in valuation arise owing to the influence of subjective desires or wants. True values are values which belong to things in their own right. They are intrinsic, and because they are intrinsic, they are absolute and permanent and not liable to change from time to time or from person to person. But false values are derived from desires or wants. They're dependent upon subjective factors, they're relative and impermanent, and are liable to change from time to time and from person to person. Giving wrong importance to a thing. The working of Maya also expresses itself by making the mind give to a thing an importance which is other than the importance which it really has. This happens when rituals, ceremonies, and other external religious practices are considered to be ends in themselves. They have their own value as means, as vehicles of life, as a medium of expression. But as soon as they assume claims in their own right, they are being given an importance which is other than the one which belongs to them. And when they are considered important in themselves, they bind life instead of serving the purpose of expressing it. When the inessential is allowed to predominate over the essential, we have the third principal form of ignorance concerning valuation. This again is a working of Maya. False values and false beliefs are the clutches of Maya. The shackles which hold the soul in spiritual bondage chiefly consist of wrong values and falsehoods concerning valuation. But some falsehoods, which are the nature of wrong beliefs, also play an important part in holding the soul in spiritual bondage. False beliefs implement false values, but they also, in their turn, gather strength from false values in which the soul has been caught up. All false beliefs are as much creations of Maya as false values. and false beliefs as well as false values are among the tricks which Maya uses in order to hold the soul in ignorance. Intellect plays into the hands of Maya. Maya becomes irresistible by taking possession of the very seat of knowledge, which is human intellect. It is difficult to surmount Maya because when the intellect is under the sway of Maya, it creates and upholds false beliefs and illusions. It creates barriers to realization of truth by the persistent attempts to sustain and justify erroneous beliefs. The intellect which functions in freedom prepares the way to truth, but the intellect which plays into the hands of Maya creates obstacles to true understanding. Discerning the falsehoods of Maya. Countless are the falsehoods which a Maya ridden man embraces in the stupor of his ignorance. But from the very beginning, falsehoods carry upon themselves the stamp of their own insufficiency and bankruptcy. And sooner or later, they are known to be falsehoods. This brings us to the question, how do we discern the falsehood as falsehood? There is no way out of the falsehood except by knowing it as a falsehood. But this knowledge of falsehood as falsehood would never come unless it were in some way latent in the falsehood from the very beginning. In falsehood, there is suspicion and fear. The acceptance of the falsehood is always a bedridden compromise. Even in the very depths of ignorance, the soul does give some kind of challenge to the falsehood. And howsoever feeble and inarticulate it might seem to be in its initial stages, it is a beginning of that search for the truth which ultimately annihilates all falsehoods and all ignorance. In the acceptance of a falsehood, there is an ever growing resentlessness, a deep suspicion, and a vague fear. For example, when a man considers himself and others to be identical with a gross body, he cannot reconcile himself completely to this belief. In embracing this false belief, there is fear of death and the fear of losing others. If a man depends for his happiness only upon the possession of farms, he knows in the heart of his heart that he is building his castles on slippery sands. That this surely is not the way to abiding happiness, that the support to which he so desperately clings may and any day give in, so he is deeply suspicious of his grounds. Falsehood betrays itself. Man is restlessly aware of his own insecurity. He knows that something is wrong somewhere and that he is counting upon false hopes. Falsehood is treacherously unreliable. He simply cannot afford to embrace it forever. He might as well garland himself with a poisonous snake or go to sleep on the top of a volcano which is only temporarily inactive. The falsehood bears the hallmark of being incomplete and unsatisfactory, temporary and provisional. It points to something else. It comes to the person as hiding something which is greater and truer than what it seems to be at its own face value. Falsehood betrays itself, and it leads man on to know the truth. The citadels of Maya. The falsehoods of vitiated thinking spring from initial mistakes in valuation. They arise as a side product of a psychic activity, which consists in the pursuit of certain accepted values. They come into existence as a part of rationalization and justification of the accepted values, and they owe their hold upon the human mind owing to their appearing to support those accepted values. If they did not affect human values or their realization, they would immediately dwindle into insignificance and lose their grip upon the mind. When false beliefs derive their being and vitality from deep rooted wishes, They are nourished by false seeking. If the error in false beliefs is purely intellectual, it is easy to set right. But the false beliefs which are nourished by false seeking are the citadels of Maya. They involve much more than intellectual error, and they do not suffer any appreciable shock by mere counter assertion of a purely intellectual nature. Clarity of perception comes from inner purity. The cutting out of the desires and attachments which vitiate thinking is not primarily a matter of merely intellectual propositions. It requires right effort and right action, not in armchair speculation, but in the doing of right things shall spiritual truths be discovered. Honest action is a preliminary to the elimination of spiritual falsehoods. The perception of spiritual truths require not merely strenuous and furious thinking, but clear thinking. And true clarity of thought is the fruit of a pure and tranquil mind.
Thanks, Mayor. Miguel, could you unmute and continue, please?
God as truth is known after transcending falsehood. Not till the stripping off of the last vestige of Maya created falsehood is God known as the truth. Only when Maya is completely crossed, there arises the supreme knowledge that God is the only truth. God alone is real. All that is not God, all that is impermanent and finite, and all that seems to exist within the domain of duality is false. God is one infinite reality. All divisions which are conceived within this reality are falsely conceived. They do not actually exist. God is indivisible. When God is considered as something divisible, it is due to Maya. The variegated world of multiplicity does not affect the partitioning of God into several different portions. There are different ego minds, different bodies, different forms, but only one soul. When the one soul is taken along with different ego minds and bodies, we get different individualized spirits. But this does not introduce any multiplicity within the soul itself. The soul is and always remains indivisible. The one indivisible soul serves the purpose of a background for different ego minds, which do the thinking and doing of various types and which go through numberless types of dual experiences. But the one indivisible soul is and always remains beyond all thinking and doing and beyond all dual experience. The different types of opinions or the different types of thinking do not introduce any variety or multiplicity within the one indivisible soul, for the simple reason that there are no opinions or any types of thinking within the soul. All the activity of thinking along with its conclusions is within the ego mind, which is finite. The soul does not think. It is only the ego mind which thinks with the background of the soul. Thinking and the knowledge which comes through thinking are both possible in the state of imperfect and incomplete knowledge, which belongs to the finite ego minds. In the soul itself, There is neither thinking nor the knowledge that comes through thinking. Soul is infinite thought and infinite intelligence. The soul is infinite thought and infinite intelligence itself. But in the infinite thought and intelligence, there is no division of the thinker, the thinking, and the conclusions of the thinking, nor the duality of the subject and object. It is only the ego mind with the background of the soul that can become the thinker. The soul, which is infinite thought and infinite intelligence, does not think or have any activity of the intellect. Intellect, with its limited thinking, comes into existence only with the finite ego mind. In the completeness and sufficiency of the infinite intelligence, which is the soul, there is no need for the intellect or its activities. God is the only reality. Within the shedding of the last vestige of falsehoods created by Maya, the soul not only knows its reality to be different from the gross, the subtle, or the mental body, but knows itself to be God, which is the only reality. It knows that the mind, the subtle body, and the physical body were all equally the creations of its own imagination, that in reality they never existed, that it was through ignorance that it conceived itself as the mind or the subtle body or the physical body, and that it, as it were, itself became the mind, the subtle body, or the gross body, and then identified itself with all these self-created illusions. God is beyond duality. God is infinite by being above the limiting opposites of duality. He is above the limited aspects of good and bad, the small and great, right and wrong, virtue and evil, happiness and misery. Therefore, he is infinite. If God were good rather than bad, or bad rather than good, or if he were small rather than great, or great rather than small, or if he were right rather than wrong, or wrong rather than right, or if he were virtuous rather than evil, or evil rather than virtuous, or if he were happy rather than miserable, or miserable rather than happy, he will be finite and not infinite. Only by being above duality is God infinite. The finite cannot be the second part of the infinite. Whatever is infinite must transcend duality. It can never be one term in a duality. Therefore, that which is truly infinite cannot be considered to be the dual part of the finite. If the infinite is regarded as existing side by side with the finite, it is no longer infinite, for it then becomes the second part of duality. God, who is infinite, cannot descend within duality. So, the apparent existence of the duality as an infinite God and the finite world is illusory. God alone is real. He is infinite, one without a second. The existence of the finite is only apparent. It is false. It is not real. The world of finite things is a creation of Maya. How does the false world of finite things come into existence? Why does it exist? It is created by Maya, or the principle of ignorance. Maya is not illusion. It is the creator of illusions. Maya is not false. It is that which gives false impressions. Maya is not unreal. It is that which makes the real appear unreal and the unreal appear real. Maya is not duality. It is that which causes duality. Creations of Maya are finite. For the purpose of intellectual explanation, Maya must be looked upon as being infinite. It creates the illusion of finitehood. It is not in itself finite. All the illusions which are created by Maya are finite. And the entire universe of duality, which appears to exist due to Maya, is also finite. The universe may seem to contain innumerable things, but that does not make it infinite. Stars may be countless. They are a huge number, but the collection of stars is all the same finite. Space and time may seem to be infinitely divisible, but they are nevertheless finite. Everything which is finite and limited belongs to the world of illusion. But the principle which causes this illusion of finite things must, in a sense, be regarded as not being an illusion. Maya is not limited by space. Maya cannot be considered as being finite. A thing becomes finite by being limited in time. Maya does not exist in space and cannot be limited by it. Maya cannot be limited in space because space is itself the creation of Maya. Space, with all that it contains, is an illusion and is dependent upon Maya. Maya is in no way dependent upon space. So Maya cannot become finite through any limitations of space. Maya is not limited by time. Nor can Maya become finite because of any limitations of time. Though Maya comes to an end in the state of superconsciousness, it need not be considered finite for that reason. Maya cannot have a beginning or an end in time because time itself is a creation of Maya. Any view that makes Maya a happening that takes place at some time and disappears after some time places Maya in time and not time in Maya. Time is in Maya. Maya is not in time. Time, as well as all the happenings in time, are the creations of Maya. Time comes into existence because of Maya and disappears when Maya disappears. God is a timeless reality, and the realization of God and the disappearance of Maya is a timeless act. So Maya is in no way limited by time. Maya is infinite. Nor can Maya be considered to be itself finite for any other reasons. For if it is finite, it will be an illusion. And being an illusion, it will not have any potency to create other illusions. For the purpose of intellectual explanation, Maya is best regarded as being both real and infinite, just as the same way as God is usually regarded as being both real and infinite. Maya cannot be ultimately true. Among all possible intellectual explanations, the explanation that Maya, like God, is both real and infinite is most acceptable to the intellect of man. But Maya cannot be ultimately true. Wherever there is duality, there is finitehood on both sides. The one thing limits the other. There cannot be two real infinities. There can be two huge things, but there cannot be two infinite entities. If we have the duality of God and Maya, and if both are regarded as so coordinated existence, then the infinite reality of God is considered as the second part of a duality. Therefore, the intellectual explanation that Maya is real does not have the stamp of final knowledge, though it is the most plausible explanation.
Thank you, Miguel. Could you continue, please, Gloria?
Yes. Intellectual difficulties in understanding Maya. There are difficulties in regarding Maya as illusory, and then are also difficulties in regarding Maya as ultimately real. Thus, all attempts of the limited intellect to understand Maya lead to an impasse. On the one hand, if Maya is regarded as finite, it itself becomes illusory, and then it cannot account for the illusory world of finite things. Therefore, Maya has to be regarded as being ultimately real. It itself becomes a second part of the duality of another infinite reality, namely God. And from this point of view, therefore, Maya actually seems to become finite and therefore unreal. So Maya cannot be ultimately real, though it has to be regarded as such in order to account for the illusory world of finite objects. Maya is God's shadow. In whatsoever manner the limited intellect tries to understand Maya, it falls short of true understanding. It is not possible to understand Maya through the limited intellect. It is as unfathomable as God. God is unfathomable, ununderstandable. So is Maya unfathomable and ununderstandable. So they say, quote, Maya is God's shadow, end quote. Where a man is, there is his shadow also. So where God is, there is also this inscrutable Maya. The enigma of Maya is solved after realization. But though God and Maya are inscrutable for the limited intellect working under the domain of duality, they can be truly understood in their true nature in the final knowledge of realization. The enigma of the existence of Maya can never be finally solved until after realization, when it's known that Maya does not exist in reality. Maya does not exist in two states. Maya does not exist in two states. In the original unconscious state of reality, there is no Maya. And in the self-conscious state of God also, there is no Maya. It exists only in God's consciousness of the phenomenal world of duality. When there is the consciousness of the gross world of or the consciousness of the subtle world, or the consciousness of the mental world. Maya exists when there is no self-consciousness, but only the consciousness of the imagined other, and when consciousness is helplessly dominated by the false categories of duality. Maya exists only for the illusion. Maya exists only from the point of view of the finite. It is only for the illusion that Maya exists as a real and infinite creator of unreal and finite things. From the point of view of the last and the only truth of realization, nothing exists except the infinite and eternal God. There, the illusion of finite things as separate from God has vanished, and with it has also vanished Maya, or the creator of this illusion. The knowledge of realization. Self-knowledge comes to the soul by looking within and by crossing Maya, and in that self-knowledge, it not only knows that the different ego minds and bodies never existed, but also that the entire universe and Maya itself never existed as a separate principle. Whatever reality Maya ever had is now swallowed up in the invisible being of the one soul. The soul knows itself to be what it has always been, eternally self-realized, eternally infinite in knowledge, bliss, power, and existence, and eternally free from duality. But this highest form of self-knowledge is inaccessible for the intellect, and it is incomprehensible except to those who have attained to the heights of final realization. Nirgun, or God, the absolute impersonal without attributes, chapter 3, page 53. God in the beyond state is absolutely independent of the world. He is the source of all power, knowledge, bliss, beauty, and wisdom. But at the same time, though conscious of his power, beauty, and other attributes, he is not, in the beyond state, able to express these qualities. He remains eternal in the sense that he ever was, is, and shall be. We imagine he was, before that he was, and still before that he was, one who has no beginning and no end. Since our imagination is quite unable to grasp this truth, we can only conclude that such a state is entirely beyond our grasp and understanding. It is almost useless to try to write anything at all about the absolute God. As Meher Baba says, quote, whatever is said about God in volumes of Puran scriptures and the Gita is just all mere talk, end quote. For to speak correctly of God is to say, quote unquote, God is. That is all we can say of him in his beyond state, where there is no beginning and no end, for nothing exists but God. But, quote, nothing exists also. And here we refer to the previous nothing, Pragabhava, as expounded by Dr. Mascarenhas in chapter 6. Let us try to see how this nothing represents the whole universe. Nothing, previous nothing, exists latently in God. If only God, the absolute, is, then God is everything, and in this infinite everything, nothing is latent but it is. As the Master has explained, the first imagination, which Vedanta calls, quote, unquote, lahar, and Sufis call, quote, unquote, human, is the first urge on the part of God to know himself. As soon as this urge appeared, a beginning was made, not of God, but of the urge. It was the question, who I am, who am I? Do you want to continue because this noise?
Oh, it's fine. It
It's
sounds
okay?
fine to me. Go ahead if you don't mind.
Okay. Now we come to nothing. God, instead of knowing himself, began to know nothing. This process may be likened to a man tickled out of his sleep into a gradual opening of his eyes, a progressively full awakening. When he finally awoke, but not in full consciousness, he saw the object, his own shadow, and not himself. By passing gradually through the 7 stages of inward evolution, through the rise of expanding consciousness, he attained to a full opening of the eyes, and then came the consciousness of a fully manifested shadow, the shadow being our illusory creation. This is Maya. The shadow was latent in God, in previous nothing, like the tree in the seed. The previous nothing being the seed. God saw himself as such, but only himself as the shadow. Impressions, sanskaras, gathered and grew as the shadows of creation flitted past, the alternations of pain and pleasure, beauty and ugliness, birth and death, piling up in profusion, germs of imagination and illusion. If God is to have knowledge of himself as he really is, this can only take place in full open-eye consciousness. This culminated event takes place only when man has attained to his highest spiritual consciousness after ascending and passing through the various stages of the path to complete self-realization. Thus, God becomes conscious of himself in man's highest state of consciousness, which can only be when man has realized his inherent divinity by reaching the ultimate goal of self-realization or God consciousness. It is impossible in a short book to go into details of the various aspects of the universal mind and of God the Absolute. We are simply endeavoring to stimulate interest in these metaphysical problems, which can only be answered by one who has attained perfection. Readers should refer to Meher Baba's own work, God Speaks, written through the medium of his letterboard. This illuminated work is expected to be published shortly in USA.
I guess this is a good place to pick up next week.